So some differences between the two. So one advantage of fossil fuels is that they provide energy very quickly when burnt. If we were to burn, whenever we burn gas, like we do in kitchens, for example, in our cookers, okay, all you have to do is apply a match and the burner lights up. Okay, there isn't a very long process with it. Another advantage is that they are relatively still abundant. Okay, there are a lot of deposits of fossil fuels throughout the world, and they are still relatively abundant. So it's not like we're going to run out anytime soon of them. They are running out, don't get me wrong. However, there are still vast supplies. Disadvantages of fossil fuels is that they pollute the atmosphere, okay, especially through carbon dioxide, which contributes to global warming. We've already discussed how carbon dioxide is one of the greenhouse gases. We've talked about the greenhouse effect. Okay, so the more fossil fuels we burn, whenever we burn anything, it could be a paper, it could be wood, it could be fuel, it could be anything. Whenever we burn something, we are always releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So the more carbon dioxide there is in the atmosphere, the worse the greenhouse effect is going to get. Another disadvantage with fossil fuels is that eventually, we don't know exactly when, so it could be in 50 years' time, but it could also be 150 years' time. These supplies will run out. Okay, the supplies of fossil fuels will run out. Okay, like I said, the fossil fuels that we have came from remains of dead plants and animals that over thousands and thousands of years were pressed and pushed towards each other until they formed these fossil fuels over hundreds and thousands of years. Now, needless to say, we've been burning fossil fuels for the last approximately 200 years. We've been burning it a lot for industry, to create electricity, to move trains, to move cars. Okay, they are all fossil fuels. So currently we use a lot of fossil fuels, and we're definitely using fossil fuels faster than the Earth generates them. Okay. So let's compare fossil fuels to nuclear sources. An advantage of nuclear sources is that it provides a large amount of energy, very large amount of energy when compared to fossil fuels. Okay, so if we were to compare, shall we say, 1 kilogram of coal to 1 kilogram of uranium, the energy we would get from there, uranium would create a lot more energy than 1 kilogram of coal. It also has an advantage of it. It has no polluting gases. As I said, whenever we burn something, we'll get carbon dioxide. If we don't burn anything, okay, we do not get any carbon dioxide. And in the case of nuclear sources, there is no burning. We just expose the water to the uranium, and the uranium, because it is radioactive, it will heat up the water. However, nuclear energy has its disadvantages. And the biggest problem with nuclear sources is that its waste is dangerous to health and needs to be stored safely, as it remains radioactive for thousands of years. Okay? So once this uranium heats up the water, eventually it will not heat up the water anymore, because when something is radioactive, it gives off its energy, so it turns into something else, and that waste, that is what is extremely dangerous, and it is a bit of a problem, because the waste will remain radioactive, like we said, for thousands of years. So to throw it away without it being dangerous, there would have to be large places that have been dug up, and then we throw away the plutonium. Plutonium, by the way, is what the waste is called. Okay, so we would grab that waste, dig a lot of meters into the ground and bury everything there, and then have to cover it with concrete and have to cover it with steel to make sure that the radiation does not leak back to us. Okay? So, another problem with nuclear sources is the danger of nuclear explosions, which implies the high safety standards that are needed. Okay, in a couple of lessons we have mentioned nuclear disasters that have happened over the past, most notably the case of Chernobyl in what is now the Ukraine in the late 1980s, which left a lot of people dead that either lived close to the power station or else were literally working there. And it has left a lot of people with sicknesses, with cancers, and the area of Chernobyl is still closed off to this day because, like we've just said, it will remain radioactive for a number of years. Okay, so with the case of any nuclear power station, very, very, very high safety standards are needed, because if anything is not built exactly like it should be, the concrete is not strong enough, or the materials used aren't of the best quality, you risk there being an explosion or a fire, like in the case of Chernobyl, which can put a lot of people's lives at risk, okay, which is something we definitely do not want. Finally, nuclear power stations are also extremely expensive to build and to close down eventually when you don't need them anymore, and to dismantle at the end of their working life. Okay, so they are not only expensive to build, they are expensive to tear them down if you don't want them anymore, and it is also a bit of a hassle to take care of the waste. So nuclear power stations, while they create a lot of energy from very, very little uranium, very little raw material, they still have their disadvantages.